properties bin so we can kind of look around in here a little bit better. And as you can see right now, we're working with a giant. So we need to kind of make him fit into this shot a little bit better. Now his card really isn't in a bad place. We just need to adjust it slightly. So let's go ahead and we'll select that card. And let's turn down the scale pretty significantly so he's a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to come in over here and sort of come back to frame 0. And I don't really want his feet to kind of go through the ground like this, so we can pull that up a little bit if we need to. Great, so now he's kind of in here just like that, and that still feels a little bit large, so I'm going to turn that down a little bit more. And we can just pull that over to the side there. And then start to kind of pull this down just right there until that starts to go through this other bit of geometry. Great. Okay, so this is a really cool setup we have going on here. And if I start to click through, you can see that it sort of appears that he's walking into the rest of this shot. Now, I feel that he really needs to stay in the shadows a little bit more because unfortunately, you know, there's a pretty big change in the lighting here. So if we just pull him over a little bit where he's not walking right out into the light, we don't have to worry about him not looking integrated by not having a big light change in the footage. So we can just kind of pull him a little bit more over to the right, just like that. And then as we click through here, we want to make sure he never looks like he's inside of this wall or anything, and that actually looks like really good placement. He's still staying inside of the shadow, but he's not moving so far close to the wall that it looks strange. So I think that's a really good placement for him, and we'll be able to work with that in our shot. So let's go ahead and jump back over to our 2D view, and let's go ahead and view our scanline render. And we'll go ahead and from our last lesson, we were still in alpha mode. So let's switch that back over to RGB. And as you can see, there is our little actor. So if I just kind of click through this, you can sort of see what he looks like as he's moving through here. And we should probably just go ahead and play this back to make sure that it looks realistic enough that it feels like he's moving across this pavement here. So let's go ahead and just kind of, we'll pull this down a little bit so we can zoom in a little bit better, have a little bit more room here. And we'll go ahead and play that back. And I'm going to pause it while this plays back, and then we'll watch it and analyze, see what else we need to change. Okay, so we have this playing back here, and you can see it's not really playing back in real time, but it is going faster than it was before when we were trying to just kind of watch it back without having it previewed. So we can see that he actually looks pretty good. He looks like he really is walking on these rocks here, and he kind of, you know, takes a few steps through here, and then really kind of comes to a stop, and it really does feel pretty well integrated. So I think what we can do is add a shadow in for him. So that's one of the things that whenever we were keying, we didn't really focus on trying to preserve that original shadow. And part of the reason for that is because the shadow was going off to the right from the light sources that we had there in that studio lighting session. And so really we need his shadow to be going off to the left. So we can actually kind of fake a shadow from the information we already have, and I think that that's going to work pretty well for us considering how small he is in the shot. So we'll just kind of work with what we have for that and make a little shadow from him just kind of coming off to the side in the same direction that the other shadows are going in the shot. So we'll go ahead and stop the playback, and to create that shadow, what I want to do is kind of come in here to what we're getting out after this pre-molt node. So this pre-molt node, what's coming out of that, if I look at the 1 key, is just a very simple little RGB image of him walking along. And if we look at the alpha channel of that, you know, it couldn't be more simple. So what I'd like to do is sort of coming out of that pre-molt node, I want to have this other thing coming out that's going to be his shadow. So I'm going to add another card. So his shadow will be on a card. And you can see, you know, we're hooking 2 cards up to the same thing. That's totally acceptable, except between these 2, so that it isn't exactly the same, we're going to do a little bit of color correcting and blurring to make it feel more like a shadow. So I'll hit the tab key and we'll type in color. And color correct is going to be that bottom choice there. So I'll drop that in, and I'm just going to turn the saturation down so that we don't have quite so much. You can see now he's pretty desaturated, and then I'm just going to take the gain and turn that way down to it almost being black, not quite. And then we'll go ahead and hit tab again, and we'll add a blur node just so it's not, you know, a perfect outline. And I'm not going to change the blur because I want you to be able to see what it looks like before and after the blur. So let's go into our card, and you can kind of see what this looks like. So it sort of looks like a shadow. If I come in and start turning up the blur, you can see that we get a really nice kind of fuzzy edge through there. Great. Now let's also go in and just kind of plug this in to our scene. So we'll just come into our scene and just grab another little output arrow and plug that into the card. And then let's view our scene. And I'm just going to middle click. And you can see now we've got this kind of giant shadow up here. So we need it to match up with him. So I think actually what would be easier than creating a new card would just be to duplicate card 6 because it already is the right size and positioning. So, well, for the most part, so we'll select that, hit Control C, Control V, and then we'll just delete card 7 and then put it back into place, just like that. Okay, so now it's kind of directly on top of him. What I want to do is kind of lay this down on the ground. So I'll double click card 8, which is the one the shadow is on. We'll just kind of come in here and I'm going to rotate this down. So I'm holding Control. We'll rotate this down flat. And I really need this to be at just about 90 degrees. So I'm just going to come in here and we'll turn that up to 90. And then we can kind of push this down and sort of line that up with his feet. Now, as you can see, it looks decent, but it's, you know, not perfect, and it's way too dark. So what we'll get into in our next lesson is kind of further integrating and animating this shadow, because if we click through, even though it's going to have those same movements with his knees and those types of things, it's not going to always fit perfectly with him in space. So you can see if we go back to this first frame, that looks very strange. So we will need to add a little bit of animation to that, as well as a slightly different technique for being able to get this shadow to be lighter overall. So stick around.